In the beginning of the 1960s, I was working as a ship's doctor, as I recounted in the previous chapter. But in 1962, I had emerged from the sea, and I was off to Canada. And I was amazed how little there was. Like, we went for miles. Like, if you went 160 miles in England, you'd go through about 5 big cities. And then we drove for miles and miles and saw nothing but cornfields, occasionally a little village with names like Elbow, Saskatchewan, or Biggar, B-I-G-G-A-R, and the sign on Biggar said, New York is bigger, but this is bigger. But tiny villages, and then miles and miles of nothing but flat cornfields and no hills. So I felt like I was at sea in the middle of land. It was a very strange feeling. And so I had a little time to roam around Saskatoon and see what a sort of city this was. It was called a city, but to us it would be like a fairly large country village, about 100,000 population with one main street. And I began to look around, and I saw a bar there, and on the window of the bar was the message, mixed drinking. I said, what does mixed drinking mean? So in order to find out, I went in and ordered a mixed drink. And they said, what do you mean, mixed drink? I said, well, it's just a mixed drinking. Oh, they said, that doesn't mean. Do you know what that was? It means that recently a law had been passed to allow men and women to drink together. Before, that had been against the law. So I thought, this is a fairly primitive society. So this was quite a recent idea, that men and women could drink alcohol together. So I thought, my God, what a God. And then I looked at the entertainment. And there were 2 cinemas. One was showing Dracula in the girls' dormitory, and the other one was showing King Kong meets Godzilla. So I thought, well, obviously this city needs a transfusion of culture. So in collaboration with 2 of my colleagues, we opened a coffee house. And we called it the Louis Riel Coffee House. It had previously been the Peppermint Lounge, and we converted. We hired an artist to do some murals. We had the place painted up. And then we had debates on Cuba. We had chess matches. After I'd seen my patients, I would go and play the piano for the customers for a little while. And we had folk singers, quite famous folk singers singing. We had queues around the block. It was wildly successful. Although the manager cheated us by stealing a lot of money from us. That's another story. And then one of our waiters, whose name was Joni Anderson, came up to me and said, I'd like to try out as one of your singers. I said, well, okay, I tell you what, we'll get 2 of my partners together and we'll do an audition and we'll see how good you are. So I got my 2 partners to come and say, one of our waitresses wants to audition. They said, okay. So she sang a couple of songs, and the other 2 said, forget about it. And I said, well, I'm interested in music. I said, I think she has something. And also she has, as well as I think her singing is interesting, her interpretation of the song has a musical understanding of the song, but also she has something of that indefinable thing called stage presence. So I say, we give her a go. So the other 2 said, well, okay, if you think it's okay with us. So we said, okay, you're hired. So she sang for a week. It's not my kind of music, but she was very, very popular. They loved her, and she went on for another week. We held her on for another week, and then she went off somewhere else. And I forgot all about her and never heard about her again. Never heard anything of her until 30 years later. And 30 years later, somebody sent me a book. And the name of the book was Girls Like Us, and it was a biography of 3 different singers, one of whom was a woman called Joni Mitchell. Well, I'd never heard of Joni Mitchell. I didn't know who she was. And I wondered why they'd sent me this book. But at the beginning, they pointed out, read page so-and-so. So I read page so-and-so. And there was this account written by Joni Anderson of how I had interviewed her. She described me as a man with an Oxford accent. Renny Gold, she gave my name, described as a man with an Oxford accent. Actually, I went to Cambridge anyway, and as having a powder blue Jaguar, which was true, and that I had sponsored her, whereas the other 2 had disagreed. So this was a story of Joni, somebody who'd apparently become Joni Mitchell, presumably by marriage, I thought, who'd apparently become famous, although I'd never heard of her, because I don't listen to that kind of music, you see. So I thought, that's funny, I gave her a start. Famous person, her start. Although I wasn't fooling myself, I was quite sure that her talent would have got her a start somewhere else if it hadn't been myself who happened to be the first to hear her. So I thought, well, I'll try and get hold of her and tell her this is the person who gave you her start. And I phoned her agents, but I never got through to her. They probably thought that I was some crank trying to get hold of her. So I've never managed to re-establish contact. But anyway, that's my story of giving Joni Mitchell a start. And meanwhile, the restaurant was a great success. Stop there?